Hello, I'm Paula Johnston from Construction Software, and joining me today for a CATChat is James MacQueen from BDO Auckland. James is a construction accounting specialist, and today we're going to talk about um, the construction generally, but the New Zealand Retention Amendment to the CCA. So, James, welcome. Can we start by telling us a little bit about BDO and yourself?
Certainly. So I've been specialising in the construction sector a little bit for most of my career, but since the initial retentions regime came in, I've been focusing on the construction sector quite specifically. Yes, we do the annual accounts and tax, but most of my time is spent on succession planning and just helping directors with the challenges that they're facing. So it's mostly not accounting, but with a bit of an accounting overlay to it. And certainly when the retentions regime first came in, there was lots of issues, and that's opened a lot of doors for me, introduced me to a lot of clients. And now we act for a very large number of head contractors, and then we provide benchmarking services to them and various other services as well.
With the new retention, do you think the legislators have got it right this time? Because we've had, fairly stringent retention rules in for a while that nobody seems to comply with. So, what's your view on how this is going to work out this time?
Okay, so the first version of the rules was probably the worst legislation I've seen in my career. And it was impossible to do anything really with it. The second version has dealt with a lot of the problems in the first version, but it still doesn't cope with everything. And it unfortunately hasn't been tested before it was issued by accountants. And one of the issues that we find is it does not cope with bulk top-ups or top-downs into your retentions account. It assumes that you will pay out your subbies from the retentions, you'll put money in there subby by subby, but most clients pay their, basically do a bulk transfer of retention money in or out from their trading account into the retentions trust account. So that's where it could have been better written. But overall, I think it's so much better that we have to work with it and make it work.
My concern with that was the reason it hasn't worked over the last little while is that it's not policed, and there seems to be no penalties. It needs to be audited, or there needs to be penalties for people to take it seriously, because I'm finding, a lot of people I talk to really just don't take it that seriously because they don't think anything's going to happen to them if they don't comply.
Okay, very, very good point. The first version was so badly written that it wasn't really practical to audit it, and because it was too vague, and similarly, because of that vagueness, it was really too hard to actually have a successful prosecution for people not complying. There was one court case between a head contractor and a subcontractor where the subcontractor forced the head contractor to put money into a separate account because they weren't. In this new regime, if you want to force somebody to do it and get onto it smartly, you need to do the same process. In other words, just bring a summary judgment procedure saying that somebody is not complying to force them to comply. That way you've then got funds in a trust account and you're better protected. But then if we go back to auditing and prosecutions, I think MB this time around are more focused on prosecutions, and therefore I think there's a reasonable chance there will be prosecutions, but it's going to require people to actually dob people. It's going to require probably subcontractors to dob in head contractors that are not complying. Otherwise, MB is simply just not aware of who's complying and who's not.
But doesn't it take a fairly brave subcontractor to do that? I mean, if you're going to put in a complaint or dob in a main contractor, it pretty much means you're not going to get to work for them again. You're not going to get on the attender list again. So,
look, you can do it anonymously. That's not a problem. And if a company is not giving you certificates or documentation to show that the funds are not in a trust account, then that's going to impact upon pretty much all of their subcontractors. And I would encourage subcontractors to make sure that people comply.
Well, if they can complain anonymously, where do they do that? How do they do that?
They will go back, go to Ministry of Business Innovation, MBIE, and there is a construction component to that organisation. It's a big organisation, and they could do that direct to MB.
Okay. Do you think that the directors of the various companies understand the seriousness of it? Because, the fines are pretty horrific. I think a lot of people just, they sort of go, oh, yeah, I'm aware of it sort of thing, and just brush it off.
Yeah. Look, I think a lot of people are still not really aware, but the consequences are actually quite serious. There's fines against the company and fines against the director. If someone can't comply because the company hasn't got the money, they're not going to be too worried about the fines against the company because there's no money anyway. But the bigger issue is the fines against directors. And the way that works is it's it's up to 50,000 per offence. Now, if you've got, say, 5 projects, 20 subbies on each, that's very quickly 100 offences times 50,000. That's 5 million. Now, probably first time around, we're not going to be seeing the maximum penalty, but it's not going to take long for it to become a big number, and therefore people do just sit up and take it particularly seriously.
The first report is due out over the next couple of weeks. Certainly most of our client base is sending them out today and yesterday, so it's been a flurry of activity this week. Do you think that most of the companies are ready for this?
Right. Companies that don't have construction-specific software are generally not ready. It's fine if it's got a very small number of retentions, then they can do it with Excel and they can probably cope. But my view is you need construction-specific software to be able to do it if there's any volume of transactions. I know that CAT software it's set up well and working well. I'm aware of 2 other software packages. One is, it works, but it doesn't comply and it's pretty unsatisfactory. And the other one, again, it works, but it's administratively cumbersome. So CAT is probably in that context is probably the most organised, easiest to use, and most compliant that I've seen.
Yeah, it's been a lot of work actually. We had nearly 2 months development to get it right. So I can understand not everyone getting up to speed with it because it's been expensive, and just to get it fully compliant and to automate it. And I think one of the big challenges that everybody faces is, who does the report go to? Does it go to an accounts person? Does it go to a managing director? How are we storing? Who does it go to? So I think that's something everyone kind of forgot through the process. But anyway, one of the other things I wanted to ask you is, for a lot of the companies, the more compliant ones, they've been putting retention money in a separate account for years. So they've got it sort of the cash flow under control. But for a lot of them, they're actually having to set up a bank account now and transfer money into it. It would seem to me that not everybody has the money to put into this retentions account. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I agree. Those that have been doing it for a while have got the cash set aside for their full retentions amount and are able to comply. And in most cases, I think they're putting all of their retentions into the account and all their retentions through the new regime, even though it only applies to new projects. My concern is around those that haven't been complying, so therefore don't have the cash. And construction is tough at the moment. There's less work about, margins are tight, and a lot of cash needs to be put aside. And if people haven't got the cash at the moment, my concern is they're not going to have enough cash to be able to consistently comply and still run their business. So and it gets more complicated than that, because as work sort of volumes reduce a bit, people's work in progress starts unwinding. What I mean by that is most people tend to bill in advance during a job, but at the end of the job, the cash flows become either neutral or negative, and therefore that's for some people, that unwinding of work in progress is now soaking up a lot of cash and leaving people in a particularly tight situation.
Yeah, there has been a lot of turmoil in the construction industry the last few years with materials, COVID, supply shortage, skilled labour, etc. What we're seeing with our client base isn't so much less work. Most people seem to have pretty full order books, actually. There's not many that we're dealing with that seem to be struggling. However, margins are no better than they were 10 years ago. So margins are low, definitely, but there still seems to be the volume of work there. So I guess, probably we deal with different people within the different companies as well. But certainly, I don't know how some of them survive with some of the margins they're working on. And we've seen a lot of liquidations in the industry over the last year, both in New Zealand and particularly in Australia. The liquidation rate is really high. It's scary, and I can only see, sort of more ahead. One of the things that we've found interesting, and I'd like to see your side of this, is the common denominators for these liquidations. Like, we've been trying to identify what are the common denominators with the companies that are, not surviving. And we've sort of identified, 2, 3, 4 reasons that are common. And I'd like to see that from an accounting point of view. What do you see as the main reasons for, or the common reasons for liquidations?
Probably the first reason is the owners, the senior people in the organisation need to be across the jobs. If they're just letting employees run the projects and are not across the jobs, then those jobs quickly get out of control, and then it's too late and too hard. And that only applies to a few. Now, probably cash is the biggie, is because if people can do everything else right, but once they run out of cash, then it's all over and it's time to call in the liquidators. So that requires people to actually be planning their cash flows properly. As I said just before, managing your work in progress and if it starts unwinding. And then probably the next one after that is actually having good accounting systems and again, probably construction specific software so that the accounts are right. A lot of people, some people don't manage or don't record their work in progress correctly, therefore they don't know their true financial position. They don't fully understand the cash flows from it. And when those companies collapse, it's often a bit of a surprise. The other thing that we're finding is, and I've seen this right through my career in construction, is that the toughest times is when you've got a big gap between projects. So when one project finishes and either the next project has been significantly delayed, or maybe they were busy working on doing the work rather than marketing, and it's the gaps between projects cause a bigger loss and a bigger impact on cash flow than just having a few bad projects.
Yeah, I'd agree with everything you just said then, but I think there's a few things a bit lower down, a bit more lower hanging fruit, if you like, that I think people can deal with and make things better. One of the common denominators against all the liquidations that we've seen is companies that allow their staff to work from home. And that has been a common denominator without exception. And the reason, I say that, apart from it being common, is it's destroying morale. We're seeing that, company pride is being lost. People are slagging off their companies regularly. And I think you also lose what's in your peripheral. Like, so many of us know so much more than we think we do because we've heard it in our peripheral. You lose all that when you're working from home. I mean, forever I'll be asked something where somebody will say, oh, do you know anything about such and such? and you'll sort of think, oh, yeah, I heard so-and-so talking about that the other day, because there's all the stuff in your peripheral. So I see that as, a really big common one. And the other one would be creation and approval by the same people. Whether it's a budget or it's policy or it's monthly financials, I think you need to have a different person doing the creation to who's doing the approvals. And so that seems to also be quite common. And, the other one is no direct labour. And again, these days, most of the construction companies are construction managers rather than builders, and that's the way of the world. But you've got to have some direct labour. There's a lot of companies that don't have a supervisor or a project manager visiting a site more than once a month, or especially on the residential front. So there's just no supervision or no direct labour or none of your sort of, loyal troopers as such. So, those are the lower hanging fruit items that I see for them. It's affecting morale everywhere.
Yeah. No, I'd agree with that. And picking up on the working from home, that was certainly an issue for us, particularly with newer staff, is they don't know what they don't know. And which means that they don't know what questions to ask, and they sit at home and struggle. And you're not communicating. People don't know the whole picture, and it's a massive issue. So I'd agree with that one. The project, the staff one's an interesting one. Yeah, if they need their own supervision staff on every single site, if you haven't got that, then I agree. Then it's a recipe for disaster. The own staff on sites also, it varies around New Zealand based on location. If you're in the smaller cities, the provincial areas, there's not the same supply of subcontractors, and therefore the head contractors in those places tend to provide a lot more of their own labour, and that labour becomes multi-skilled. Whereas in Auckland particularly, where there's a lot of subcontractors, then some of the head contractors are essentially project managers rather than construction companies. But I agree with you that they need people on the site knowing how the building's going and dealing with the little issues that come along before they become big issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, we've covered most of the subjects I wanted to cover today, because I really have been concerned about, the first retention report going out this month, and whether everyone's going to be complying with that. And what we're seeing this week is a bit heartening, actually, that most of the companies seem to be taking it quite serious and have got compliance at a fairly good level, whereas I don't think it started off that way.
Yep.
So I don't know. Have you got anything else you'd like to say about the industry right now?
Yeah, look, it's firstly, it's an industry that if you're a good operator, there's a lot of really good opportunities and people make some really good money. So it's an industry that I've got a lot of time for, and it's good. You look at New Zealand and our needs for infrastructure, and I'm not talking about civil type stuff, I'm talking about vertical infrastructure as well. There's a massive opportunity out there, so long as you've got the right team around you. The other thing we're seeing a lot of is the owners of a lot of companies are getting older and starting to think about what happens. And we're doing a lot more work in the succession planning area in terms of helping identify the young people coming through, getting them a shareholding, and then that gives the older owners the opportunity to slowly exit out. Most of those we end up doing basically because the perfect guys coming in often have got a wife at home, a big mortgage, no money, but they want to work hard, and therefore they end up basically paying for the shares by dividends. And that model actually works remarkably well.
Yeah, I think most people associate BDO just with accounting, and I know firsthand that you guys do a lot more than that. I mean, I think we have 30 or 40 clients in common with you guys. And, I've seen what you guys do, and I've seen what you do for us as well. And I guess when I mention BDO to some of the contractors, because some of these guys have got the most god-awful accountants that, you know, don't understand retentions, don't understand buyer-created tax invoices, you'd be gobsmacked at some of the questions we get asked. It's pretty scary, you know. So I mentioned BDO to some of these people, you know, saying, look, they're construction specialists and, you know, maybe it might be worth, you know, at least sort of doing a session or two or looking down that path. And the answer I get most times is, oh, but they're so big, you know, we couldn't afford them, or I don't know, you know, can we afford them? So what's your response to that?
So I think we've got to break it down into parts. We've got to say, what do they actually want from their accountant? If all they want is a crappy set of accounts for $2,000 with the wrong profit and how much tax to pay, then go and talk to somebody else, because we won't be the cheapest. If they actually want real help with their business, and want to run their business professionally, then that's a much better fit. As I said, we do a lot of benchmarking for the industry, and you know, the big part of our annual meetings with clients is actually just going through the benchmarking in detail, comparing against other companies of their size, and working out what are they doing well, what are the others doing better than them, and why, and what they can do. So that's actually a significant part of what we do. Another part, as I said, we do a lot of work in succession planning. So that's quite different to what most other accountants do. And then, as you alluded, work in progress has such a massive impact on profit, on bank covenants, on cash flow. We understand work in progress properly, and we'll help people get that sorted. What we actually often find is that a new client will approach us and say, "Hey, I want to do that. I want to do some succession planning or something like that." But as soon as we get into it, we find their accounts are a mess. And the first year or first 2 years, we end up spending a lot of time just cleaning up a mess and sorting them out. And then once we've actually got a set of accounts and systems and so on that actually work, then we can actually start doing the work that they came to us for in the first place. And certainly I've referred quite a few clients to CAT, because they didn't have construction specific software, just did not know where they're going. And that's often one of the first things we do, is get the right systems in place.
All that stuff, everything you've said there is really important. But the one thing I've seen quite a bit of and experienced personally is a lot of people that are in partnerships, they don't, and you always think your partners are terrific and, you know, there'll never be a problem with us sort of thing. So there's no good robust shareholders agreements being put in place. And I know you've done that with a couple of companies that have given me some really positive feedback. So I asked you to do one for us. And that saved my bacon when I had a reasonably acrimonious, you know, separation from a business partner 5-6 years ago, where that shareholders agreement saved the day. And I think there's a lot of people that need to think about that, because we all think, oh no, you know, we're fine, and, you know, we have a great relationship and nothing will ever go wrong. But, you know, I see it time and time and time again, is, you know, when one of the partners wants something different to the other partner, and the terrible breakups and how much money that costs everybody. Would you agree with that?
100%. In my more than 40 years as an accountant, what's become clear to me, where you've got two people in business together, and I'm excluding husbands and wives from that, those relationships always come to an end. It's only a question of when they come to an end. But yeah, and yeah, virtually all my clients through my career, where you've got a couple of different families, a couple of different people together, they all come to an end at some stage. And therefore you need a really good shareholder agreement. I sort of often describe a shareholder agreement as drawing up your divorce papers in advance and putting them in the bottom drawer.
Don't be wet.
And then when things get tight, you pull it out, and you've actually got a mechanism to unwind things. Probably the first shareholder agreement I did was the most successful one. we had one dominant personality, one submissive personality. They had a bust up basically within a week. We'd paid out the person that was going, and the business was back in business and didn't miss a beat, didn't lose any money. I've also seen shareholder disputes go on and on and on. Massive distraction, massive impact on profitability, cash flow, and in some cases it becomes the end of the business. So
Yes.
absolutely encourage a good shareholder agreement.
Yeah, and there's a lot of services like that I've seen BDO provide and have really added value. Whereas prior to that, I just thought, BDO accounts, So, okay, so you reckon that even a small company can afford you if they're using you as an advisory?
Yeah, look, we will do the accounts, but we want to have a relationship that's a lot more than just a simple set of accounts. If I say, what's the ideal BDO client? Certainly, if you're over $20 million turnover, yes. Or if you're sort of smaller than that but aspire to grow, then let's get things right from the get-go rather than have a mess and then BDO comes in to clean up a mess in a few years' time.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Okay, well, unless you've got anything else to add, I'd just like to say thank you very much for joining me on a CATChat today, because I think this construction industry, and in particular the retention at the moment, is such an important subject, and I really wish everyone would take it seriously, because the consequences can be awful. So maybe a couple of extra people will listen to us, James.
I am hoping. I'm hoping, because it's much better to listen to us now than suffer the consequences later and then come rushing to us. And look, just a big call out, big tick to CAT software. If people don't have software, it's the one that we recommend, because it's much better than its competition for construction specific software.
Thank you. We think so. I mean, all we do is construction. We don't do anything else. So all of our people are what we refer to as construction administration specialists. Most of us have come from the industry, and we work really hard at sort of trying to stay up to date and compliant. And you've been a great help to us actually through this retentions modification, because as said before, there's been a lot of work in it, and I really appreciate the way you've let us bounce ideas and things off you. So I believe we've got it right.
Yeah, fantastic. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, James.